Have you ever promoted your best performer into a leadership role only to watch them struggle? It's usually not a skill problem, it's a confidence problem. And that new supervisor is running voices through their own head, one saying they're not ready, and one finding every reason not to have that difficult conversation. Today, retired Navy captain and combat veteran Jenn Donahue is going to show us how to silence those voices and lead like a warrior. Welcome to Manufacturing Greatness, Jenn.
Hi, Trevor. Thank you so much for having me.
We met through our cohort, through our writing group, and you've just published your book, Becoming the Warrior. And just a respect of what you've gone through in your life, right? Like the serving and just the different ways that you serve in the military and your whole engineering and more manufacturing type background. I had to have you on the show. What's interesting is that you were saying that when you're in Afghanistan, sometimes the enemy isn't what's in front of you, it's somebody else.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us
Oh,
about that.
sure. So it was very dangerous over there. Obviously, we had insurgents. They were trying to blow up our bases. People were shooting at us when we were in helicopters going places. But a lot of times, sometimes the voices in our head were sometimes some of the biggest enemies that we had. It's the ones that are causing doubt. Even though we were in the military and we had been through extensive training, like what to do in crisis and what to do in different situations, sometimes your brain would get hijacked and just go in a very different direction because we do have some of those voices of self-doubt and self-preservation that might override something that might be rational.
And I wouldn't think that when you look at your background, like we don't expect someone like you to have voices because of just what you've accomplished. Like a lot of us can't even fathom going to Afghanistan and just hearing you describe like building buildings, manufacturing buildings, and in a war zone.
Yes.
Your mind still goes into your own leadership questions. And I think that's for the manufacturing leader, right? I've said, like, and I've never been to war, but I've said on the shop floor, this feels like what war must be like because it's just everything's being thrown at us, right? A team member needs this. There's a quality issue over here. This line's down over here. The customer's calling for this. Corporate's asking for that, right? Leadership development, we're just sometimes in that war zone and not realizing it. Our own growth mindset of looking at like how in the midst of all this, like how do we know when the voices start telling us that's not helpful, right? Like I think maybe that would be helpful because I don't know sometimes if we know because we're just going through the motions. You know what I mean?
And it took me a little while to try to figure this out myself. I think we have several different voices in our head. And sometimes I talk about that, and people are like, "Are you schizophrenic?" But just start to think about some of the voices that you hear every day. There's probably a voice that's telling you, "Hey, I'm hungry, let's go eat," or "I'm tired," or whatever those other voices are. But then you also start to hear some of the voices that say, "Hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do this right now," or "Let's go do something else instead of doing something hard." And I think it really takes a lot of self-awareness to try to figure out exactly what voice is trying to tell you and what's actually helpful. Those voices that are telling you, "Hey, let's go eat," that's self-preservation. But but the other voices, the ones that are trying to maybe steer us in different directions or maybe say, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to talk to that client right now because I have a feeling they're going to tell me no. So I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go procrastinate, or I'm just going to hold on to something for as long as I can because I'm a perfectionist." It really comes down to starting to listen. And whenever I start to say this to people, a lot of times there's an aha moment like, "Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess there are, competing voices that are in our head."
And you've given some names to these voices.
Yes. So I think that there's two main nefarious voices. So one of them is the mean little voice. So that's the one that's in your head that's saying, like, "You know what, you're just not good enough.
Mm.
You're not worthy. Don't even try. Hey, you know what? You got to your position because you're a fluke." Though that's the mean little voice. That's like that nasty little thing that's back there that's eating away at your self-confidence. But there's also this other little voice, and this one is, I call it the sneaky little bastard. And it's sneaky because you don't realize it's there until all of a sudden you really start to pay attention. So this is the one, so if you're a perfectionist, this is the one that's telling you, "Hey, you know what? That paper's not quite good enough," or "Your idea is not quite good enough." let's just hold on to it. We don't want to put that out into the world. It's also the one where if you
Mm.
have to make a call to somebody and you're afraid they're going to say no, they're the ones who are like, hey, let's go make a spreadsheet instead. Because that's more fun. It takes us in a different direction than where we need to go. Some people might call that procrastination. Procrastination is something that's like, well, I just don't feel like doing it right now. But if it's taking you away from where you need to go, something that'll help you grow, something that'll take you outside of your comfort zone, that's the sneaky little bastard.
Yeah. And I think for me as a manufacturing leader, that's the one that I think I talked with daily. Because especially before I had the tools in my book, we talk about building teams and working together and getting results. And we do that through deeper conversations. I didn't have a lot of those deeper conversations because that sneaky little bastard always found something else for me to do instead of having that conversation, especially if it was around accountability and just something, maybe a message I didn't want to deliver.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
like, I'll just let that person be. And really, I should be confronting that. That's to me is kind of like what they look like. I don't have a name for it, but that's my sneaky little bastard manufacturing.
Whenever you're having those hard conversations, like you just find something else to do. That is an absolutely excellent
Hmm.
example.
And I actually get it more now. Like I've got a
Mhm.
couple people that based on my book and looking for some endorsements and different things, kind of like, well, I should probably reach out and do the ask tomorrow. Right. Because then I'll be in a better mindset. And that could be for me, it's just what if they say no?
Yeah.
Right. And what if they don't reply back? Because not sending the message is probably easier than sending the message and then not hearing back, because then that gets in my head.
And a lot of this comes from, I talk about instincts and intuition. And so those are the voices that actually keep us safe. And so in this situation, basically, the sneaky little bastard is trying to save you from having any heartache from hearing a no.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh, no, don't do that because, you might hear no. Here, let me coddle you, so that you don't have to go and get hurt.
Yeah, like even as a production leader, like there's some pretty intense maintenance dudes. And sometimes I'd be like, I'm just gonna let them be. But really, it's okay to have a conversation if I don't understand. Like you're swapping out the welder, but here the tooling's got issues. And maybe I didn't want to ask those questions. And there's some voice that said, just let them be. But at the end of the day, I was responsible for the entire operation. And I don't know if that was just maybe a part of it was the cousin just telling me that I'm not, they don't respect me enough, and maybe I'm just because I'm not a maintenance tech. But I'm just trying to relate it for our listeners, right? Because there's probably something that maybe you're driving into work, you're listening to this podcast right now. What would be something that maybe you're avoiding? Maybe that you've got a sneaky little voice in your head, and we can just kind of relate it to them. But we talked about the instinct and intuition you mentioned, and go a little deeper into that, right?
Instincts are what we're born with. So these are the things that say that we're hungry, that we need to go to the bathroom, or that we need to go to sleep. Really, these are the things that keep us functioning, and we're all born with them. And these are the things that also keep us safe. It keeps us alive. Right now, as we start to grow and mature, and we start to take in the world all the sights and the sounds and the feelings of all of that, we take all of our previous experiences and they start to weave together. So when we start to talk about intuition, this is looking at something and going back and thinking about, is this safe or not? So, for instance, whenever we were young, we were told, don't put your hand on the stove because it might be hot. That's intuition. So, whenever we walk by a stove now, we look at it and say, yeah, that does look hot. And sort of
Intuition.
my favorite one is for if you're ever walking down a street, if you ever look down an alley and you just sort of look down there and think, I don't think I should go down there. That's
Hmm.
intuition kicking in. That's all of those shared experiences that we've had. And it's also meant to keep us safe. And so as we continue to grow, that's when some of these other voices start to come up. So the mean little voice and the sneaky little bastard actually grow out of those because those are also ones to try to help keep us safe. That mean little voice, we talked about the sneaky little bastard because it didn't want us to go do something. The mean little voice is the same thing. It's still trying to keep us safe, by not going for promotion or not asking for a raise or not going for a goal or something that we would really like to do
Mm,
because we don't want to have the possibility of a future failure. So it's trying to keep us safe by not trying to expand.
hmm. And so what I'm hearing then is trying to distinguish that. Is it we need to ask ourselves, is this really a safety issue? Right.
Right.
And is it just questioning ourselves in the moment? Because we're trying to apply this, like if I'm on the shop floor and I'm just thinking that, hey, there's a line that's not producing. I know maintenance is over there. I probably shouldn't get involved, just because it could be some conflict, right? Because production wants to get it going, maintenance wants to take the time to fix it. And is that where it's kind of like, hey, what's the safety concern in this situation? Or how do you do that in a day to day?
I question myself. I think about all of the different what ifs that are going through my head. For instance, in your situation, what if I did go over there? Is it a safety issue? Am I being rational? That's actually the biggest
Mm,
one. If I look at this in a black and white situation, am I doing this just because I don't want people to think ill of me? Or am I doing this because this is what's best for the organization? You
mm,
need to start asking all of those types of questions, and you'll start to get the hang of it. You'll start
mhm.
to notice these patterns where you might have avoidance. And that's really a big piece of it. If you're starting to avoid things because it's too hard, or I don't think people will respect me if I go and say something. Start to look at the bigger picture.
That resonates. Because there's a saying that I hear in manufacturing sometimes is when you see something, say something.
Yeah. Oh, same
And
thing in the military.
oh yeah, well maybe
Oh,
that's where
yeah.
it probably
You
came
see
from.
something, say something.
But then sometimes it's that voice in the head, or like, do I really want to say something to Jen? Does she really want to hear it? And but then again, I like what you said. It's this grounding in what's rational, and then what's right big picture.
Hmm.
Like is choose, choose discomfort over resentment, where it's like, yeah, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but I don't want to be sitting here and now the line's down for 2 more hours. And if I would have went over there and had the conversation, we might have been up by now.
Right. And here's an even tougher question to ask yourself. Am I being selfish? That's a tough one.
Yeah, because is it like meaning like is it my own ego because I don't want to
Right.
go through this, so I'm being selfish because I don't want to put myself through that possibility of it not going. I think I got to reach out to that person I want to endorse my book this afternoon and stop making excuses. Uh,
But look on the other side of this. What if they say yes? Like, think about that. That's what I
mhm,
always like to think about is like, you know, we have these voices that are like, no, don't do it. You know, also realize that there's also another little voice in your head. It's that voice that says, hey, you know what? I think I want to reach out to this person to get an
mhm,
endorsement.
yeah,
Listen to that voice because that's a whole nother voice. So I call that my voice, my little warrior. The warrior is like, hey, let's go do this. Imagine what would happen if they said yes. Think
yeah.
about it.
I'd feel pretty good today if I sent this out this afternoon and they replied.
I'll call him and
Yeah.
I'm going to tell him, hey, I don't know who you are, but you're going to say yes to Trevor.
Quick break. If you're a plant manager or that frontline leader or an operations leader, the Manufacturing Greatness newsletter, it's built for you. So if you're serious about getting better, go to manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe. You're going to get my 10 questions. And these 10 questions tie right into about Jen talking about silencing the voices that hold you back. And once you're ready to step up and lead the conversation, you'll have those available, give you some different ideas. Links in the show notes. Let's get back to Jen. We talk about authentic leadership. And when you feel like you want to reach out, you just reach out. And actually, I think there's a component of trust building in that because when you take that risk and you reach out, like I've heard people say, well, my leader is just so busy, I don't want to bother them. And is that just kind of the same formula? Like, actually, walk us through your model. You've got this 4-step model that you use.
I do. So it's perceive, assess, ready, and act. And all of this came from my military training. In the military, we have rules of engagement that we have to go through anytime that we're basically confronting a possible enemy. So the first part is perceive. And so this is what I was talking about is like we just need to listen to like what's going on in our head. So in the military, just say that you're at the front gate of your base and you're looking out at the sea of people and you're just paying attention, who's out there. It's basically situational awareness. And for our personal selves, we call that self-awareness. And so we're just kind of paying attention, like who are all the characters that are out there? The next phase is assess. And so assess is all about, are you a friend or are you a foe? So if you have somebody coming up to your base, you're starting to think about, is this person friendly? Is this person have,
I bet.
nefarious actions that they want to take? And so we start to do that. And we do that also with our thoughts. We talked about intuition, we talked about
Mm,
instinct. Those are ones who are truly trying to keep us safe. But then we also have the mean little voice, and we have to start to pick apart. Is this a rational thought? Am I being selfish? Am I just procrastinating? What am I doing? And start to pick apart those thoughts. That's what assess is all about. So the next part is ready. Okay, so this person, whoever it is, they're coming up to your base. There's several things that you can do. We have hand signals, we shoot flares. There's all types of different things that we can do in order to try to get them to stop, halt, whatever it is. If they just keep coming, we need them to stop. And so in our brain, this is where we need to engage our warrior. So
mm,
this is where we say, okay, you know what? I need to find that little voice. And really what it is it's taking our brain from that negative bias of the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I don't want to go talk to that person. And what we want to do is we want to shift to the positive bias of our brain. And so this gets into neurology. And what I've found is that we have millions and millions of miles of neurons that are in our head. And what we can do is we can start to shift our brain from a negative bias to a positive bias by forcing our brain to go to that side. And so what happens after about 28 days of basically forcing your brain to go to a positive bias, you actually start to be more positive. And
mm-hmm.
so instead of having all those negative thoughts, what we want to do is start to go more towards, hey, what if we can? Hey, what if we can do something? Hey, let's go try this. And really kind of looking at that little warrior and saying, like, hey, let's go do this. And it's about training, it's about discipline. And that's how we start to retrain our brain to the positive bias. So that's what we're doing whenever that person's coming up to our base, we're trying to get them to stop, but also at the same time, we're also readying ourselves and if we have to.
I,
Same thing
I,
with
I
trying to do it to our brain.
I like how you said, like, if it's an enemy, like, is
Yeah.
this truly a threat? And
Hmm.
like, because I was kind of like picturing you on a battlefield, but like
Yeah.
in manufacturing, I'm thinking, yeah, it's the same questions, right? Like, is this really a threat? And if it's not a threat, then what's stopping me from engaging or
Right.
acting, I guess?
Exactly. And that's the final piece is act. So in case it is a foe, okay, so then we have all kinds of things that we can do. We're the military. In our real life, act is just about taking the very first step. Like for
Mm,
whatever we are going to do, it's about taking the tiniest, tiniest little step in the direction that we need to go. And it's about having a little bit of courage. And it's about really having a plan. Okay, I'm an engineer. Like I have a plan. And like I have a whole series in like chapter 6 about how to make your plan, how to make your milestones, how to set rewards for whenever you get through all of these different steps. So that's really what it's all about. It's just taking that first step.
yeah, and I think where this can be really helpful too. I was talking to a leader and got an email from the head honcho about something that happened on the shift, right? So manufacturing, you got usually 3 different shifts. What happened on this shift? You get the email, and it's questioning about something that wasn't done properly, and it
Uh,
wasn't done properly.
hmm,
But the person that got the email isn't the person that was responsible for that. So I'm talking to them, and it's just kind of like trying to talk them through that because immediately what they think of, it's a threat, right? Like, oh my gosh, they're accusing me of this. This wasn't my responsibility. The other person said they were going to do it. And now I'm getting the email. And then this is happening. And now I'm probably going to have to, you know, just this whole storyland, right? So when you get those emails, like, how do you
hmm.
take your model and kind of walk us through an email like that?
I always take a couple seconds first. Because the first thing is like, oh, I want to write back to this thing, you know? That's just
Right?
who I am. So I force myself to stop and go through the whole process again and start to dissect. Okay, what am I thinking? What are they trying to say? And also, emails can be so vague. Sometimes, like, we think somebody's yelling at us, and they're really not yelling at us. They're just, that's just the way that they type for whatever reason.
Hmm.
And trying to go through and pick apart my own thoughts and also maybe what the other person is trying to say. And at that point, then addressing whatever needs to be done. If you can, pick up the phone and call. A lot of times
Mm.
I found that if I just pick up the phone and call and have a real conversation with somebody, we can usually get things sorted out and we can talk through a lot of the issues. So that's always, I'm a big fan of communication. And so if you can do that, I
Yeah.
think that's a great way. Otherwise, you might have to go and talk to other people. Like if you can talk to a colleague, maybe find out what's going on. Those are some of the things that I would do before just shooting back an email.
Mm. I like that. And it's just a reminder, make the phone call, assume that it's not an intent,
Right,
like negative intent. Like, can we just start with like, what would be positive coming out of this email?
right.
Right? Like, what would be the good intent? And it's just so hard because it's like, oh, did I say something wrong? Or like, is this person accusing me of that? And that's why this whole thing of becoming out the warrior and your subtitle, harnessing your inner strength to silence self-doubt. And that's why like this, even this podcast episode, we're calling more like frontline leadership development and manufacturing supervisors, silencing self-doubt, leading with confidence. We won't dive into it too deep today because I'm a big fan of the sneaky little bastard because I feel like they hang around a lot more than its cousin, the self-doubter. But like when we talk about for manufacturing
Hmm.
and leadership development there, and we talk about the imposter syndrome,
Mm.
and you go into that more. But for a manufacturing leader, what's the distinction that you find people miss? Because I want listeners to understand, like, you are an engineer, you can walk into a manufacturing plant tomorrow and just jump right in. So you know the personalities that we're dealing with, the pressure, and then there's a bit of jockeying sometimes. And there's a balance of this humility. I want to remain humble, but at the same time, I want to show confidence. And then sometimes that can turn into just arrogance. And there's
Mm.
this dance. But walk us through, if we're leading a team, a manufacturing team, walk us through how you see the difference between humility, imposter syndrome, overconfidence. Where do you where's the right line?
Ooh, that's a big question. So, humility. I really believe all of us should be humble as we can. And what I mean by that is, humble is about recognizing what you really can do, but maybe you're not braggadocious about it. But as somebody who is humble, they're also willing to ask questions. And I
Mm,
think that's really important for leaders is to be able to ask questions and say, you know what, maybe I don't really understand this. Can you help me more with this so that I am better at my job? And a lot of times people have a hard time with that because they feel like I'm the person in leadership, I should know everything. But what I found is the leaders who actually go out and talk to people and ask questions, they're the ones who get more respect. And they're usually have more loyalty with the people that they're around. And so being humble is really about still recognizing everything that you can do, but you're just not bragging about it to everybody. Now, on the other hand, imposter syndrome is not recognizing what you can do. It's thinking about everything that you've done in your past, all of your accolades, all of the letters that you have behind your name, all of the things that you can and have done. All of a sudden, imposter syndrome says none of that matters.
mm,
That's really the difference between humble and having imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome does not recognize what you've done, and it thinks that you're basically an empty vessel. That's really what it's about. It's imposter syndrome is if you are in a position and you don't believe that you should be there. That's what it is. You think that
mm.
you're a fluke. You think you got there because you're lucky and that you really have nothing to contribute to the people that are around you.
That's a good definition because I don't often feel that exactly. Sometimes it's like, should I, can I really publish this book? I think all of us authors go through that. But probably in manufacturing too, we probably get to a certain point when things aren't going well. Like I was just talking
Mhm.
to a plant manager, and the company really likes this plant manager. And there's just some struggles because it's just a newer role. And it's just like, hey, they chose to put you in this position. Like you have a great background. You have to work on some skills. That's it. And then when we look at it that way, and it's like, okay, my leader has my back. That's always helpful. And we've got a good relationship there. I like that whole separation. And I also appreciate the fact of coming from Canada, there's a lot of PNGs and they have the ring. And as soon as they say, hey, I'm a PN, like I'm in this club, if they would have asked me like a really good question, about the process, I would have gained a lot more credibility from them. The good
True.
ones were like, oh, that's a good question.
Mhm.
Like, I hadn't thought about it that way. I can see that makes a lot of sense to me when you talk about that. I got a note here about putting on armor, right? I think about Brene Brown, the vulnerability, take off the armor if you really want to be in the
Mhm.
ring. Some of that resonates with me with your work because, like you said in the beginning, it's about that mindset.
It really is. One of the things that you talked about is the person who got into that position. And I think that's so important that I think people need to remember is that most companies, they are very risk averse,
Mm.
but they believed in that person so much that they put them in that position.
I like to say the best people are inside your four walls. You're there for a reason. Because
Hmm.
what does the sneaky little bastard say? Well, maybe it's not. It's the cousin, but it's a hey, maybe they want it. I got this email. Maybe I'm going to get
Hmm.
fired.
Yeah.
Like, how much of a pain it is to fire someone and then
Oh,
replace them? Like, usually only ego driven sick leaders, and there's some of those in manufacturing.
yeah, there are some.
There might be
Yeah.
some in the military as well. Uh,
Hmm.
there, with outside of that small percentage, most people don't want to fire you.
They might be upset with you,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, but work through that.
Yeah.
Communicate.
Yeah. Well, so much more to cover here. The one thing that I really liked out of your book too, for me, was like writing it down. Writing goals down makes someone 42% more likely to achieve them, especially when we're so technical on our phones and not at our desks a lot because we're running around the floor. I do want to close just saying congratulations, Jen. Like, so that as you guys, as the listeners may know, once a month I do a book report. So this month is on Becoming the Warrior, Jen's book. And there's not authors listening, it's manufacturing leaders, so they don't know, like when you see an Amazon bestseller, it doesn't mean a lot because you can just do well for a day, but to be a US Times bestseller, that's a feat, right? There was a lot to go into that, and you made the US Times bestseller list, so congratulations, Jen. It's just a testament of your
Thank you.
work,
Thank
right?
you so much. No, I attribute it to everybody who's been following me.
Mm.
It's if it wasn't for them, there would be no way that I could get there.
And how do the listeners best follow you other than going to listening to this podcast and reading your book report?
Sure. I can be reached at jendonahue.com. It's Jen with two N's. Also on LinkedIn. I'm always on
Mm.
LinkedIn. And I love to talk to people on LinkedIn. I like to hear their stories. I like to hear what they've overcome. And so
Hmm.
that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Cool. And I'll put the link in the show notes to buy the book.
Thank you.
Highly recommend it. And the fact of like, if any of this resonates with you today, just in general, you got some really great tools on how we can apply that. I think there's just such a connection to manufacturing and just your background and what you've went through. And yeah, just great job. It's a privilege to get people that I can really connect to the shop floor, right? And just with your whole background, I was like, oh yeah, I gotta have Jen on the podcast. And it's just cool to see. I know how much work has gone into this, right? For in closing, then, if I've got a frontline leader right now and they're just ending the podcast, they're going to work. What do you want them to be thinking about this morning, or afternoon, or midnights, whatever shift they're on?
I'd really like to start to have them thinking about everything that they've done in their past.
Mm,
I mean, just like start pulling all of that up. All of the maybe different awards that they've had, or how many people they've trained, how many people that they've promoted. I want you to start to
mm,
think about all of those positive things and just start thinking about it over and over again and realize all of the great things that you have already done
mm.
because that is really what's going to help propel you moving forward. It's that positive bias. It's like the ability to say, hey, you know what? I got this. So when you start to have some of those tough conversations or whatever it might be, I want you to remember all of the amazing things that you've already done in your life.
That's a great note because I'm thinking of like great frontline leaders. Sometimes we'll have temps come in, and it's intimidating. If you haven't been in a manufacturing plant, you walk in as a temp, one of the most important person is that frontline leader, and just that ability to give them the confidence. And just think about how many people that you've trained, maybe people that's gone from temp to full time, that lives that are changed. And I just want to see manufacturing of better conversations, more warriors, less armor, and grow our industry. Thanks so much for helping us, Jenn.
Thank you, Trevor.
As we talked about at the break, if you want to subscribe to that newsletter so that you have information that we can't give you everything in this podcast and get those 10 questions and start now, go to manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe. Links in the show notes. And thanks to Jenn Donahue. And you can also grab Becoming a Warrior, book solid, and you can check out the tools that she has in the links below as well. Thanks for joining us today.